Previously on the channel, we've shown you guys Gordon Murray's incredible T50 supercar, and there's been whisperings in the media that him and his team have concocted another car. People are saying it's a GT car, maybe a mini T50, but looking at this thing, I think they've all got it completely wrong. Welcome to the T.33.
Keep it fresh, y'all. Yes, yes, y'all. Microphone check, y'all. Yes, yes, y'all. Rockin' with the best, y'all. From the north to south, east to west, y'all. Yes, yes, y'all. Rockin' with the best, y'all. Yes, yes, y'all. Microphone check, y'all.
Gordon, it's great to have you back on the channel, and I hope you've had a great start to 2022. You had a good start to the year so far?
Indeed, yes. Well, this.
Absolutely. So let's cut to the chase. T33. I'll tell you what I see, and then you can tell me how wrong I am. So I'm seeing very much a lot of T50, but longer bonnet on it. T50 would stop somewhere around here, I think. 2 seats instead of 3, and I've peeked in and it looks like it's a similar V12. What is this car to the T50?
Actually, the only real connection to T50 is GMA. So when we were doing the styling, Kevin Richards and myself and the studio guys, we wanted to keep a little bit of the T50 or GMA DNA in the car. And you will see that with like these creases over the haunches, for example. But the proportions are very, very different. And that's actually forced on you by the fact it's a left or right-hand drive. It's a 2-seater car because with a central driving position, the driver would be 250, 280 mil further forward, the pedal box, than this car. As you quite rightly point out, the windscreen is very forward cabin. So the F1 was the first car to do that, of course, very forward cabin look. And with 50, we got even more extreme. We shifted the glass forward another 30 mil, so that was even more forward cabin. But this has got more what I would call classic proportions. So the cabin sits roughly in the middle of the car. And it's a car I've wanted to do for 25 years. When I finished the F1, which once again I was stuck with the forward cabin. Stuck sounds horrible, but forward cabin from a styling point of view. And I thought then one day I'd love to take all my favorite 60s sports racing car influences, all the cars I've loved. I really don't like doing retro in any way, shape or form. So not retro in a brand new form.
Sure.
But just a nuance from those cars, you know, things like the 206 Dino SP, the racing car, the Miura.
I was going to say Miura, right there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Porsche 904, you know, all the stuff I've loved, and put them in a modern shape and make something that really sort of goes against what everybody else is doing at the moment. All the new supercars tend to be more and more outrageous, more and more aggressive, more and more features on them that don't do anything at all, that are there just for styling's sake. So this is about as pure as it gets, I think.
I think it's even more visibly pure than the T50 and especially T50S, but that's not saying that there's less aero trickery going on. So what is the aerodynamic package on this car? I'm guessing it's underneath.
It is indeed, and the front of the car, as you see, it's got no splitters sticking out the front.
Yeah.
Because this sort of form, these cars didn't have those modern aids in those days, and that would have ruined the front of the car for me. So 50, the fan, as you know, we've got the very steep diffuser.
Yes.
And we suck the air out of the front corner, of the steepness, and we get the air to flow around the full diffuser, and that actually creates downforce nearer the center of gravity, not at the rear of the car, which meant we didn't have anything on the front. We learnt a lesson on 50. One of the runs, when we switched the fan off, we still got an increase in downforce, not anywhere as much as the fan on, and we found that the base suction behind the car was still pulling air through the duct and making the air still follow some of the diffuser steepness, if you like.
Sure. Yeah.
So we stuck that one in the cupboard. And when we started designing this, we started designing still quite a radical diffuser, but nowhere near as radical as 50.
Okay.
And we use the base suction to pull the air up in that steepness. So we still make a reasonable amount of downforce towards the front of the car, which means we don't have to have the splitter.
Okay, so around about here, there's still quite a serious step
Yes.
in the diffuser.
Yeah, very, very unconventional.
Right.
And also, to be fair, our downforce targets weren't as aggressive as 50 on this car.
Okay. And T50 was very much manual. T50S, you had the paddle shift option. Mm-hmm. What's the situation here?
This to try and appeal to a slightly broader audience, if you like. It's full federal type approval, not show or display like 50 is. We're offering left or right-hand drive, which is quite unusual for only 100 cars. But if that's designed into the car from day one, it's not as complicated or expensive as you would think. And the other thing we offer is either a manual box, comes standard with a manual box, but we offer a paddle shift on this.
Okay, I'd be really interested to know what the balance is between, I'm guessing there's been some pre-orders. Do you know the balance between manual and paddle shift?
Yes, we haven't strictly gone on sale yet, obviously, because we're not launching yet. But we've gone out quietly to T50 owners and a number of people who have been in touch constantly since the 50 launch saying, what are you doing next?
Yes.
And more than half the cars are pre-sold. And of those cars, embarrassingly for me, only 3 of them are paddle shifts so far.
Okay.
So we could get to a point where out of the 100 cars, we've only got 5 or 6 paddle shifts, and it's cost a lot of money to develop this particular transmission with X-Track.
Okay, and when you look at other companies that are creating supercars, they have a very stepped gallery of cars. They've got their halo product, and then they'll have a middle ground, and then they'll have more of a sports car down the bottom. Is this the middle ground car? Is your T50 up here, and this is more your GT style thing?
I would say we've got 7 principles in GMA that we absolutely will stick to. All the cars are up here. It's just that T50 we said would be our halo car. This car has got the same attention to detail, the same level of engineering, the same quality, the same driver focus. What sets 50 apart from this are the aerodynamics, of course, central driving position, and the absolute on-the-limit V12 at 12,000 revs. Those are the 3 elements, really, that set 50 apart.
Okay. And then round the back here, this looks very F1 T50, but then it tails off nicely, and you end up with this diffuser that we've talked about. So what's going on at the rear here? Much less so than the T50.
Indeed, because we don't have the fan, but everything on our cars has a function. So you won't find anything around here or anywhere else that doesn't actually have a function in life. So this, for example, is an active spoiler to give us high downforce mode, which is driver selectable, and automatic braking enhancement. Obviously, all this is to let the hot air out of the engine bay.
Okay.
And the diffusers, of course, interact with the base suction behind here. These are to let the air out of the rear wheel arches to reduce lift. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to keep the lights, once again, really clear. I hate these modern melted fruit shaped lights, you know, which are going to look awful in 10 years.
It's light bars that everyone's going on these days.
And just because you can now with LEDs, people go crazy with them, you know.
Yes.
10 years' time, they're going to look really stupid.
And one thing I've been meaning to ask, we filmed at a place called Catesby Tunnel, the aerodynamic facility, and I was imagining you guys would definitely want to get your cars there. Have you taken them down Catesby Tunnel yet?
We haven't, but actually my aero guy actually put something on my desk before Christmas about the tunnels. Fascinating.
Okay. And this roof scoop here, is this exactly the same as T50 in terms of feeding the engine?
No, this is actually very different. So from my very first styling sketch in summer 2020, I always had this idea, this funky idea, where I wanted to do like a 70s Formula One car, where the airbox is actually directly attached to the engine and moves with the engine, because of course the engine's on NVH rubber mounting.
So I'm imagining sort of James Hunt, Hesketh type thing. Similar.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So on 50 in the F1, this is part of the monocoque, but of course you need a bellows or some sort of flexible mounting because the engine's moving and the car isn't.
Okay.
And that damages the internal airflow because it's not a smooth wall. So this is sort of Formula One, if you like, or older Formula One. Even modern Formula Ones have the same thing, don't they? So that should be really funky.
Okay, so while you're going up the revs and then changing gear, is that entire assembly going to buck with the engine?
Yeah, it's going to move. It's only a few millimeters, but it is going to move.
It'll be noticeable.
Yeah.
Cool. And then speaking of that engine in there, we've got one over here.
Yep.
So the first thing is these gleaming yellow cylinder heads. Are they color-coded? Because I remember the first GMA engine was orange.
Yeah, sort of. Okay. So the official title for the engine is Cosworth GMA. That's actually a Cosworth name. That's what the engine is. Mm-hmm. And the original engine, of course, was designed for 50 to 12,000 rev unit. And we made those all our heritage orange, so you can tell instantly that that's a 50 engine. Sure. When we did the 50S, that's a very different motor, 28 kilos lighter for a start. For the 50S, those are all red. And then Kev Richards and myself decided we'd pick yellow for the Series 2. So this is a GMA Series 2.
Okay, and I think when all the news reports came out of, whispering about T33, everyone either thought GT car or mini T50. So maybe even thought there's going to be a chopped down V6 or this would be heavily detuned, but that's not the case with this.
Absolutely not. It couldn't be further from detuned. In fact, it's heavily retuned. So once again, we gave Cosworth a clean sheet of paper for 33. And it's magic what they've done. I mean, just taking 1,000 revs off the top. To be fair, we wanted to keep 50 the Halo car and special. Yeah. And any engine on valve springs of this capacity at 12 is a little bit edgy, let's say.
Okay.
So taking 1,000 revs off the top left the T50 special, but more importantly, actually gave them, as I say, a clean sheet of paper to retune the engine. So they've got different head geometry, different cams, of course, very different mapping to the variable valve timing, completely new take on the intake system, new geometry and a different way of running the throttle bodies, and a very new exhaust system. And the combination of that gives us 75% of max torque at 2.5, but even more amazingly, 90% of max torque from 4.5 to 10.5. On an engine that revs to 11,000.
Yeah, those things don't compute really. That seems absolutely
Well, they
crazy.
didn't compute to me in my first meeting with Cosworth back in the end of 2018, where they said we wouldn't need 2 engine modes, and I insisted because when I grew up, you had torque or you had revs and power, and the two didn't mix very well. And they said right from day one, we won't need that. And now I can see they were right and I was wrong.
They won that argument then. So in terms of maybe not on-track performance is not the best thing, but say if you were to drag race T50 versus T33, how would the characteristics be different between the two engines?
Well, actually, T50 is going to win every time because it's about 100 kilos lighter for a start.
Okay.
But also, both these cars will be traction limited up until 3rd gear, so the torque doesn't help you if you're spinning the wheels.
Yes.
But from a drivability point of view, now that I've driven 50 several times, I just cannot believe the low-down torque. I'm already doing my McLaren F1 trick where I'm pulling off without touching the throttle. Okay. Just on the clutch, And I did the Millbrook Hill route in 5th gear. You know the little hairpin at the top, which is 1st gear normally, 1st or 2nd?
Yeah, yeah.
5th gear. No shuddering, no hesitation, just whoop, round and down.
Okay, from what we've seen, it's all been Dario Franchitti, but you yourself have got behind the wheel. What are your cars like? What's the T50 like to drive? So,
well, it's beyond expectations, to be honest. I mean, I was very open with everybody. I was doing another F1 just because I didn't think anybody had. And not so much the central driving position, but more just focusing on the driving experience and forgetting top speed, 0 to 60s, Nordschleife times, all that sort of stuff, just focusing on the drive experience. And I have to admit, it's an F1, but just so much better, Okay, well, this is your high-revving multi-cylinder engine. I'll be back in 2 seconds. So, Gordon, your engine's revved to 12,000, and I've been told
that my one is going to do exactly the same. So this is a 2-litre V10 engine, 22.5 degrees, made by a company called Connaught. And we're going to be putting one of these in my MkII MX-5. So,
excellent.
As you said, you started designing engines. What do you make of this?
Well, I was like extreme stuff and interesting stuff, and I have to say I've never seen an engine quite like that too. And obviously, looking at this machining, a roller bearing crank.
Yes,
yeah,
that's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, those are quite complicated because, of course, being a roller bearing, they trap the bearings, so they all have to be built up and pressed together.
And I'm right in saying you own a little Honda, which has a very similar design to that.
Well, it's not V, of course, but it's an S800, yeah, and it revs, it's early 60s, as I recall, and it revs to 10,000. And as a teenager, when they came out, I just had to have one of those, but of course I could never afford one. So now I've got one, and it's a hoot.
Okay, well, hopefully if things work out, by the time there's press drives happening of these cars, my MX-5 will be finished and we can have a bit of a rev off.
Yes, I look forward to that. It also should have a really fast response time.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
we promised 50, and of course this engine will have an identical response to 50. We promised the T50 would be the fastest response time of any car ever built, and it will by a mile, because even the free revs, when you put the clutch in the neutral and you lift the engine up, we haven't measured it properly yet because we've already seen 45,000 revs a second.
Bloody hell.
So not only is it the highest revving engine, but the fastest revving engine, the lightest V12 ever made. I always said to people when we started the 50 program, I think this will be the greatest V12 ever made. I hope. Now that I've driven the car and I've heard the engine, like you have, I can categorically say this is the best road car engine ever made. I think this will go down in history as the fastest, lightest, best.
Well, that's it. Where'd you go? Have you made a rod for your own back here?
Not really.
Where'd you go from here?
No, not really, because we've invested so much money and effort in this alongside, Cosworth's expertise. As the electric ocean overtakes us all, we'll be the last NA V12 flag waving because we're a small company, so we're very flexible. We don't have layers of management. We don't have shareholders going, well, why are you doing that sort of thing? So we'll be able to hold on to this because our product cycle time is only 36 months. So of course we're planning ahead, but we'll be able to hold on to an NA V12 longer than any other car company. And I've already said, this T33 will be our last non-hybrid car, unfortunately.
Okay. So there's designers back at GMA HQ that are looking at a hybrid car right now.
Yeah, and we started an electronics company a year ago, so we're looking at doing our own system with a couple of partners as well.
So, Gordon, I think we've covered most of the car, but are there any secrets of the T33 that we haven't quite covered yet?
Probably the closures. We talked earlier about having, good luggage capacity, 280 litres, 6 cases. The closures on this car are a bit wacky. So the front one, there's a couple of cases in here. This is rear hinge, so it opens in a conventional way, 2 suitcases. The doors are dihedral, the same as 50.
Right, okay.
But the rear luggage compartment, which is in the flank, just the same as 50 or the F1, if you like, top loads. And from a styling point of view, we didn't want any extra shut lines across here, which would have wrecked the car, really. So we've got a hinge point back here, and this shut line here is the luggage, and these open like suicide doors.
Right, okay.
So you can drop the luggage in. So in addition to that, both of these are top hinged and flip up. One side's fuel and the other side's oil. And of course the engine cover comes up as well.
Okay. And was that deliberately wacky, or was that just the solution?
No, we just struggled. In fact, we almost gave up, to be honest. It was weeks and weeks and weeks trying to think of how we could do it without an extra shut line. And then just a brainwave one day, just thought, well, why don't we just open the whole thing?
Okay. So to finish up, I've got a question. I want to create a sort of simulation for you. Say down here, we've got an SLR, an F1, a T50, a T50S and a T33. and you've got to get from here to the Highlands up to Shieldaig today, which one are you taking?
T50.
Really? Why is that?
It'll be the quickest.
Okay.
Very closely followed by this, though. So, this has still got, you know, a power to weight ratio better than an F1, so it's going to be quick.
Okay, well, Gordon, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure.
I can't wait to see this running.
Yeah, me too.
This car could so easily have just been a microwaved, warmed up version of the T50, like a lot of other manufacturers do, changing the odd little bit and then just rebranding it as a new car. But Gordon has said you can count on one hand the amount of components that have been carried over from the T50 into the T.33. And I keep thinking, where does the GMA team go from here? They go to such extremes that they must create a rod for their own back, but they just keep going. The T50 was one step, this is another step. Who knows where they will be in just a couple of years' time with that engine, especially the X-Track gearbox they're thinking about. It's going to be sensational. I've been Mike, and don't forget to subscribe to Drive Tribe.